Hi, I'm Denise, and I'm the also the presentation chair. I'll be introducing our speaker today. Her name is Lorraine Siegel, and she's a certified conflict management coach, a trained mediator, and a teacher, and was accidentally referred to as a licensed marriage and family therapist in the newsletter. That was my mistake. She has her own coaching and training business, Conflict Remedy, here in Santa Rosa. She also teaches interpersonal and workplace communication and conflict resolution skills at Sonoma State University and St. Joseph's Health Life Learning Center. She'll be, today her talk will be combining conflict resolution and forgiveness in her presentation. I'll let Lorraine explain more about that, what that means, and how it can help us with our clients. Welcome.
I'll just stick it in my pocket. There, now you can hear me. Good morning. I'm so delighted to be here with all of you. And I just wanted to say before I start really talking that it was interesting that we got mixed up of which topic I was doing. I had proposed just forgiveness at one point and then proposed this new topic, and I realized I didn't want to go back. And when I reflected on why, it's because, not that I stopped doing forgiveness work or valuing it tremendously, but I realized that a lot of people have negative associations with the word forgiveness. Now, as a goddess, 12-stepping Buddhist, and Native American influence person, I had no negative influences, but I noticed that some of my students and clients, you'd say the word forgiveness and their brows would get furrowed and they'd get this worried expression on their faces and their energy would go dark. And so I've been stepping away. I haven't changed everything on my website, but stepping away from the word forgiveness. Because as all of you know, we need to meet our clients with language that speaks to them. And if I use the word forgiveness and they go to this bad place, I'm not serving the goal of helping them. So instead, I've been moving towards talking about making a clean getaway. And people say, yeah. And I say, and talking about love, clarity, and freedom, and they say, that sounds good. And talking about letting go of resentments and letting go of resentments, and they say, oh, yes. So I'm thinking of forgiveness as the F word that we have to be really careful with. And I am going to use it some with you, because I trust that you will take it in a good way. But I wanted, it was really interesting to have a chance to reflect on that. And what I want to do is my little earpiece is floating around.
It is. It's just got to go a little bit more on. That will work.
I'm actually a hold the mic kind of gal, but
should we just let her hold the mic?
Let me hold the mic. Oh, thank you. And then what I can do is I'll go back to this if there's questions. Okay. Can you hear me okay? Is that as good? Great. For some reason, it feels a lot easier, even though I'm holding two things. Oops, and I've gone way forward because, what happened? I must have hit something accidentally trying to get, you're seeing my whole presentation. No, don't look. I'll start it over. Okay. Close your eyes. Pretend it wasn't there and you didn't see it. Okay. All right. Here we go. Back to making a clean getaway. So what I want to do is tell you a little bit about my story. Start by telling you a little bit about my story, because I feel like, I'm hitting it. Okay. Everything that I've done in my entire life has led me to the work that I'm here, both a personal and professional journey. So I want to talk about that and how I see the connections between conflict resolution and forgiveness, and the three main issues that I see around this that I want to share with you, around getting clarity around from the past, about letting go of resentments and regrets, and about communicating clearly now. And I want to say one other thing, which is I teach a full 2-day class on communication skills and conflict resolution at Sonoma State. And I teach another one just on workplace conflict that's 2 full days. And I teach an all-day workshop on letting go of resentments, et cetera. So in 90 minutes, which is what I have with you, all I can do is give you just a very brief introduction to some of the work I do. And I really tried to pull out the most important things and not talk too fast, so I just overwhelm you, but do understand that this is just an introduction to the kind of work that I do and the ways that I work with clients and teach my students. Okay, understood? Very good. And so just to tell you about my story, is it popping because it's a mic or I'm holding it too close, or? Okay, we're all right. I grew up in what I would call a moderately dysfunctional family. You know, I have no horrific war stories or anything like that. But my parents were themselves wounded people, as most people are. And they couldn't give me, they loved my sister and me tremendously. They did their best to raise us with as much integrity and effort and everything as possible. But they could not give us what they didn't have to give, what they had never learned. And so I learned a lot about holding grudges, about holding on to resentments, about feeling tremendous shame. Somehow I was supposed to be perfect, and I could never measure up, so I did not feel good about myself. And I blamed other people because it felt too bad to take it all on myself. It's, you know, you get the idea. I'm sure you hear these stories every day in your practice. And so as I started growing up, I went on a personal spiritual quest to find happiness, really. I just thought there's got to be a way to feel better about myself and better about life. I was so aware that a lot was missing. I didn't know what it was. And I did a lot of, I did therapy, I did goddess work, I did 12-step and Buddhist meditation, and they were all helpful and to varying degrees. And one of the common themes, something I really learned was crucial, was about letting go of resentments and regrets. That if I was carrying a huge burden of holding grudges the way my mother, bless her heart, had for 40 years and told me all about them, that I was never going to be able to show up and be happy. And so I did a ton of letting go work, of forgiveness work, and found compassion for myself and for other people. And it was so much easier to let go of those resentments and let go of those regrets. And when I did that, it was as if a ton of psychic weight had come off my shoulders, and I was able to move through the world in such a lighter, better way. And it improved my relationships and everything. So that was a piece of it that it felt so good that I've been doing it ever since. As soon as a resentment comes up, I activate my inner forgiveness network because I know how much I need it. So one of my big challenges with forgiveness came professionally. I was a tenured professor at a community college for 20 years. I learned so much from my students. I had a bunch of leadership opportunities there, and it was a toxic stew of backstabbing, petty resentment, you name it. And it was very challenging to be there. And I used my forgiveness and letting go tools, praying for these people that if I told you all the details, you would wonder how I was able to let go of the grudges and the resentments, because they did some pretty horrific things to me. And so that was helpful, but it wasn't enough. And as I saw how they moved through conflict, and I witnessed so-called mediations that were actually lynch mobs, I thought there's got to be a better way. And so I went back to school and started studying conflict resolution. Got a conflict resolution certificate, got trained as a mediator, started being a mediator at Recourse Community Services and a small claims court mediator. I got certified as a conflict management coach, and I started teaching these subjects at Sonoma State and working with clients privately and mediating. And what I realized, my clients and students desperately needed the conflict resolution skills and the communication skills, but they also needed to let go of resentments and regrets. And it was a big missing piece. And so in all my classes, whether they were called managing conflict in the workplace or bullying or whatever they were called, I started incorporating work on forgiveness and letting go of resentments, because it was crucial. Unless we can let go of resentments, we cannot resolve conflict. I will state that categorically. It's just impossible, because it totally gets in the way in a mediation, in coaching, in any relationships with people, whether personal or professional. Could you hold questions for later? Thank you. I wasn't sure if you were calling my attention. So, where was I? Yes, my intermediate story. So, and I noticed as I started doing that work with people that the other missing piece was inner child. That when people were holding on to resentments, a lot of times it was because of things that had happened years before. So I started doing that as well. And and one of the things that I came to understand as a media is the power of stories. The power of the stories we tell. As a frame, because I was trying to figure out, how does this all fit together? How does the conflict resolution and communication work I do, and the forgiveness work and the inner child work, how does it all fit together? And what I realized, that it was all about stories. In mediation, we talk about my story, your story, and the third story. One of my teachers in conflict coaching talks about the stuck story, that we get stuck in stories. And from brain chemistry, we know that people don't remember actual events. They remember the story that they tell themselves about the event. And when we tell the story over and over, it has a power far beyond what it should. And we tell these stories about our pasts, about ourselves, about what other people did to us in the past, or who other people are now. We tell these stories about our life now, and we tell these stories about what our future possibilities are. And they can be wonderful, expansive stories, but for most of my clients who are dealing with conflict and communication and resentment issues, these stories are limiting and hurtful, and they hold people back. So I love this quote. A dear friend of mine told me this from Stan Laurel. He said, "That's our story, and we're stuck with it." But the truth is, we aren't. We aren't stuck with those stories. And a lot of what I do with clients, using the skills I have from various places I've come to see, is about helping people shift those stuck stories. So, and those stories, as I said, past, present, and future. And so my three themes are, how can you work with conflict, work with communication skills, and work with letting go, so you can view your past with clarity and compassion, and other people's as well, let go of resentments and regrets, and communicate clearly and effectively now. So I love this quote from Marianne Williamson, that spiritual growth involves giving up the stories of your past so the universe can write a new one. That's what it's all about, is letting go of those stories and writing a new story. So how can you help your clients do this? The first thing that's really important is to help them become conscious of the stuck story. People don't even know they're telling a story. They think they're just telling the truth about their lives, and they don't even realize that what they're doing is telling a story. So there's some ways you can tell. I mean, you probably intuitively, you folks have a lot of skill with this. You probably intuitively know what I'm talking about. But just to run through it, the signs of a stuck story, one is repetition. Telling the story over and over and over and over and over until it seems like the absolute truth. And just to give you a funny example of this, as a small claims court mediator, I would literally be out in the hall 5 minutes before they were going to go before a judge. And these folks would have these stories that they told to their husband, to their neighbor, to their best friend over and over, and they believed they were true. And they had so little relationship to reality that I could hardly keep a straight face sometimes. For example, one man was being sued for not paying his rent, and his mother was there with them. And they're saying, he's such a responsible boy, and he always pays his bills, and how could they be suing him, la, la, la. It turns out his landlord was going to be selling the place, so he assumed he didn't need the rent, and he stopped payment on the check he'd given him without telling him. But he believed his story that he had done nothing wrong. And I was, my mouth kind of dropped open. But it's just an extreme example of what we all do, that these stories, the more we tell them, the more power they have over and over. And the trouble with these stuck stories is that they're full of dangerous resentments, regrets, victims, and villains. And I remember someone telling me once they thought they had marquee headline stories, and they realized they were just sitting around sharing home movies. And that's part of it. If you can reduce it from a marquee headline to to home movies, that's progress. And a lot of times it takes work and gentleness, but people can understand that it is just a story and that there's other possible stories, the universe writing a new story for us. So the stories, I wanted to just say another piece about resentment. I love this quote: resentment is like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. And I know that a lot of people like this quote, because when I went looking to attribute it, to say who said it, it was attributed to about 15 different people: Malachi O'Court, Annie Lamott. There's a whole website about how it's not the Buddha, but just think of that image. I hate you, you hurt me, I'm going to drink poison. And we do this. Oops, wrong direction. So one image I sometimes use with my clients about resentment, yes, those are potatoes, you're not hallucinating. Just think what would happen if you put a potato in a Ziploc bag. Okay, I mean, if you're carrying it somewhere for a minute, it would be fine. But think, what would happen after a day or 2 or 3? Start sprouting. And then if you carry it around for a week or 2, what would happen? Starts to rot. And if you carry it around long enough, all you would have is toxic sludge in the bottom of your bag. That's resentments. That's what they do to us. And I say that to my clients or students, and they go, whoa, do I have rotting potatoes? And a lot of us do. So if we're able to let go of these resentments, it leads to healing. It leads to freedom. And it leads to forgiveness. And I love this quote from Jack Kornfield: forgiveness is letting go of the hope of a better past. And that's really about letting go of the coulda, woulda, shoulda, what ifs, if they'd done this, all of that stuff is gone. It can have tremendous power over us, but if we let go of the hope of a better past, we can absolutely have a better present and a better future. So, what does it mean to let go of resentments? Now, I'll just tell you, I used to call this, what does it mean to forgive? And I'm changing it because of the associations people have. But it's really about the same thing. The resentments are about forgiving others, and the regrets are about forgiving ourselves. So, what I want to do is just a little myth busting about resentment, some of the things that people believe about it that aren't true. So, letting go of resentment doesn't mean you forget what happened. It doesn't mean you approve of what happened. It doesn't mean you're going to be a doormat and let someone do it to you again. It doesn't mean any of those things. You know, people have this mistaken idea that their resentments are protecting them, that they're keeping them safe, keeping them from being hurt again. And they don't. All they do is block the good stuff. So, and if you let go of a resentment or a grudge against someone, it doesn't mean they have to be your best friend afterwards. This kind of letting go of a resentment towards someone, they don't have to deserve it. It's about you and what you can do or your clients can do to have a peaceful heart. And people have this mistaken idea that only, you know, the Buddha, Kuan Yin, Mother Teresa forgive, and it's not true. Ordinary people can let go of resentments and regrets every day. People think there's a rule that you can only let go of it after someone has apologized, and that's not true. And on the other side, just because someone makes an apology doesn't mean you have to let go. It's always a choice. But forgiveness is a choice we make that heals our hearts. And one last quote about forgiveness, which I love. It's from a book called Courage to Change. Instead of thinking of forgiveness as a gavel, which I pound to pronounce someone not guilty, or as an eraser, which I use to wipe the slate clean, I think of forgiveness as a scissors. I use it to cut the strings of resentment that bind me to a past hurt or problem. By cutting them, I set myself free. And that's real. I love that image, that it's really not about the other person. It's about disentangling yourself from them, about setting your own self free. It is a gift that we give ourselves. I want to give you an example of a client of mine who, this piece of it, the letting go of resentments, was crucial. She was estranged from her mother, held a grudge and resentments against her going back 25 years, really. Was perfectly content in a not happy way, to not have any contact with her mother. But her daughter was getting married. And there was going to be back east, and there was going to be a whole slew of wedding-related activities, pre-dinner and bridesmaids party and rehearsal dinner and all that. And she came to see me in despair and panic because she did not know how she was going to be in the same room with her mother through all of this and not have an explosion. So we did some different pieces of work. We did some very practical communication skills of what were the triggers that led to a bad conversation, practicing avoiding them, how could she detach, all those things. And I also had her do affirmations, and she was a religious person, so I called them prayers. You can just call it sending good thoughts if someone is an atheist or doesn't have that kind of practice. I had her say a prayer for her mother's well-being, blessing her and wanting everything good for her for 2 weeks. So we did this work together, and she texted me from the wedding. She said, "You are not going to believe what happened. My mother is talking to me in a way she never has before, expressing appreciation, just so present. I can't believe it's the same person." And as a matter of fact, it healed their relationship so much that her mother hurt her back while she was there, and she stayed an extra week to take care of her mother. And I just thought it was so beautiful. It's a miracle. But she was willing, and she did practical and spiritual work to get there. So that was a really lovely example of this letting go. Also, another important piece of this is it's often the inner child that needs some healing, whatever techniques you do, in order for the adult to be able to let go of the resentment or communicate differently. I just finished, I usually do a coaching package with people. I do a series. I don't see them for a long time. It's a bit different from some therapy that way. But I worked with a client who absolutely could not get along with her supervisor. It was creating all kinds of problems. And so we did a lot of sort of more the conflict resolution side of things, of looking at what her assumptions were and what Fred Luskin calls the unenforceable rules about how she thought this woman should be as a supervisor, and rehearsed actual different ways she could talk and detach and all of that. And it helped some, but she kept coming back to the woman would say one thing to her and she would be furious. It just triggered her all over the place. And what came out was that this woman reminded her of her mother. And she'd had a terrible relationship with her mother for good reason when she told me some of the things her mother had said to her about, we didn't want you, really awful, awful things like that. And so we did some work with her inner child to help her inner child see that this wasn't her mother. And also get some of the love she had gotten from, be able as an adult to give that to herself as a child. And it made a huge difference for her. We did this, actually, it was kind of a Technicolor guided visualization where she had to keep tearing her mother's mask off to see it was actually the supervisor. And then she kept trying to tear off the name tag that said she was the supervisor and couldn't do it, and tried to create her own. And I made up a lot of things, and it worked. And she emailed me just yesterday and said, this woman is still a pill, but there's so many other wonderful people who work there, and I just don't let it get to me. And I thought, yes, that was the goal of the work that we did. And it always feels miraculous, which is one reason I love doing it. So the stuck stories can be about the past, but they can also be about the present as well. And learning how to communicate clearly and effectively now can really change the story, that they're understanding your story and the other person's. And the main thing here that people don't recognize automatically is the stories aren't the same. That it seems like you could be in a completely different movie from the other person if you hear their story. And if yours feels totally compelling and the only one, you don't look at that. I don't know, any samurai movie fans in here? That's kind of a stretch. A couple of them. There's a classic samurai movie called, I just forgot the name, Rashomon. It was one of the early ones that tells the same story from the perspective of 3 different people. You look at one story and you think you understand totally what happened, and then they tell the same story visually and verbally from another person's perspective, and it's completely different. And that is part of the work that I do with clients, is to help them get that the stories are not the same. And they're shocked. It never occurs to them that someone else is the center of their own story, and it's really different. They're the hero instead of my client. So, and one of the ways I sometimes frame this, people will come and say, this person's impossible. I can't talk to them, I can't relate to them. And impossible sounds daunting, but I know that just means I don't understand them, and I'm stuck in a pattern of communicating with them that doesn't work. So one thing I tell my clients is that you can make a decision to communicate respectfully no matter what they throw at you. And it's part of the rehearsal and practice work I do, is for them to take that as a touchstone. And of course, again, I know I'm circling around, but that does mean letting go of old baggage of what happened in the last conversation with the person, what happened 20 years ago with this person. And one of the things that helps people reframe this and let go is work I do on emotional triggers or hot buttons. We all have these hot buttons. Someone says or does something little, and we fight, flight, freeze. We feel like the nuclear explosion is going to go off, and we are so mad. And one thing I've learned I spend a whole hour actually teaching just hot buttons, one thing I've learned is that when you have a button like that, when you have that kind of emotional trigger, it's never just about the present. It's always about a past pattern with that person or with someone else in your life. So just really quickly, understanding those hooks, becoming conscious of what got triggered. Well, just a quick example. My wife would rearrange the dishes in the dish drainer after I'd washed them. And I would be so mad at her. And I assumed that she was saying I was stupid and couldn't even load the dishes right. And of course, it was my mother, bless her heart, who had done stuff like that to me, and that's why I was so hugely angry. And as I talked to my wife about it, the reason she did it was because of the messages she got when she was little that everything had to be perfect, or she was going to get punished. So understanding those hooks, finding compassion for ourselves about them, and then being able to not take the bait when you're invited to have that kind of trigger, it really helps my clients and helps me. I wanted to just share a story where this was a big issue for another client of mine. She had recently gotten married. It was a second marriage for both of them. And her adult stepchildren were really pretty awful to her, literally ignoring her or hanging up the phone when she called. Their mother had died and they couldn't accept that their father had found love again, etc. And when I met her, she was a minister herself, so she knew, she was a very high level of spiritual awareness, but she was absolutely stuck with this. And what we realized was, and it kind of ties several of the things together, that where she was going when they ignored her like that was to a very little place. Where she felt like a little victim and they weren't paying attention to me, and she got really little and she felt awful and she wanted to hide under the covers kind of thing. And she was able to find a lot of compassion for what these adult stepchildren were going through. But she was able, with a lot of help and praying for them and rehearsing and letting go, she was able to act as if. So she would come over with her husband, and the adult stepchild would say, "Oh, Grandpa's here." And she just said, "And I'm here too," instead of going to a dark story. And I put this up. This isn't an actual story. I just pulled this off, a picture off the web. But part of the fruits of the progress was they included her in an extended family photo for the first time after an excursion. And it was real progress. There she was in the photo, whereas before they were completely ignoring her. And the thing I love about coaching is they never knew she did this work. Other people don't have to know for it to be effective. So something else that helps you get through this hot button trigger place, as well as the awareness of what that trigger is the 90-second rule, which you might be familiar with. Actually, I know two completely different 90-second rules, but the one I'm talking about here is the first 90 seconds is when we respond. Now, I'm not a neurobiologist, so my explanations are always very simple, and it's not for your sake. It's because that's where I'm at. But the first 90 seconds, we respond from the reptile brain, or possibly the mammalian brain, but never from the prefrontal cortex. That's when we get the fight, flight, freeze syndrome. And that hot button triggers you, and you feel that nuclear explosion, and if you react in that first 90 seconds, you're going to have an argument. If you can get through it, which people can learn to do with awareness of that it was a trigger, they don't have to respond, they don't have to take the hook. And the other thing that helps them get through the 90-second is a really simple technique, which is just to slow down and breathe. And I just want to have you do this with me for a minute. And I'm just going to show you the simplest one of just, you can think, what you're going to think while you're breathing in is you're going to think, I'm breathing in peace. And as you breathe out, you're going to think, I'm breathing out peace. And I'll do it, which is hard to breathe and do, but you think it and I'll do it for you. So, I'm breathing in peace. I'm breathing out peace. I'm breathing in peace. I'm breathing out peace. I'm breathing in peace. I'm breathing out peace. Did you feel the energy in the whole room shift when we did that? And when people remember to do that, then they're able to access all their knowing and know that it was a trigger, that they don't have to do it, and listen or respond differently and consciously. Makes a huge difference with conflict. Oh, am I breathing? I better, I better check. Okay. So, So along the same lines, one of the things that I tell my clients and we work with on, that feelings are not facts. Another way to put this, I read this somewhere recently, I'm sorry I can't attribute it because I don't remember right now, but true but not real. Or no, real but not true. It feels so real. Or is it true but not real? I can't remember. I'm sorry? Who? Oh, yeah, maybe that's where I got it. I read so many different things. But it's the idea that feelings feel so real and so compelling. These issues from the past, the hurt that someone's caused us, the trigger in the moment, it feels huge. But it doesn't mean it's the truth. It doesn't mean we have to ignore it or pretend it's not there. But it doesn't mean that it is the truth. So something else, this comes from mediation and conflict coaching. And I wish I had, one of my wonderful conflict coaching teachers, a woman named Cindy Noble, has something called the not-so-merry-go-round of conflict, which is based on interviews and focus groups she did about how people describe the course of a conflict. And you go through all these stages from your perspective and from the other person's perspective. And again, I spent about an hour and a half just on that, so I can't do it all for you. But one piece that's really important is these distinctions between assumptions, intentions, and impact. So when something happens that hurts us or triggers us, we make an assumption that they intended to hurt us. When we do something that hurts someone else, we know our intentions, or sometimes know our intentions were pure, and we didn't mean it. So we're very tender about ourselves. Oh, that was just the situation. I didn't mean to hurt them. But when someone does it to us, we assume that they meant to hurt us because we judge ourselves by our intentions, and we judge other people by the impact that their actions or words have on us. And when people can unhook that, it is very powerful at resolving conflict, helping them let go of resentments and establish a new relationship. Because people, someone else walking their own path in the middle of their own story does not necessarily know the impact that their actions or words have on you. And it can be one really simple example I use is if you're driving down the street and you're in a hurry to get somewhere and the person in front of you is going really slowly. Our tendency is to think they're stupid, there's something wrong with them, they're doing it on purpose because, they're controlling. And they might be looking for an address. They might be on their handless phone and not focusing the way they should be. We don't know. And so those changing the way we think about what's happening is immensely powerful to our feelings and our issues. Okay, so I summarized from about 5 different places. This is in your handout, and I think there's extra ones up there somewhere. Some questions you could ask your clients about their stories. Now, it's on the back of the front page. Does everybody have one? I'll just give you a second. I hear the kind of rustling that means people are looking for stuff. Let me see. Oh, I'm not attached, so I can look. Does someone else need one? Oh, you've got some. Okay. You've got one? It's on the, you don't need, oops, they wanted to come with you. This is really a summary. I'll be honest, I put this together for you, and I haven't used it in this way with clients, but it might be more questions that you would ask yourself and see where to put for the clients. But this is a summary of the not-so-merry-go-round of conflict and the stuck story and some work from Byron Katie and my own hot button work. So what I'm going to invite you to do is just for practice, just to try it out, to think a minute about each of these questions. You can write or just say it. But what is the stuck story you're telling about yourself, the other person, and or the situation? Is the story about the present, the past, or both? What's triggering you? What values or needs of yours or aspects of your identity are being challenged or broken? What assumptions are you making about the other person's intention or motive? Do you absolutely know that they're true? That's the piece from Byron Katie. She does that all the time. I love that. And what better story can you tell? And what do you need to get to that better story? So this is really, it's pretty compact here. But, yes, there's something about doing a presentation. It's the distilled essence of some of the work I do, and you're getting it. So let's see, how am I've still got time, right? 40 minutes? Oh, yeah. Yeah, okay, good. So I'll give you another minute to look at this, and then I'm going to give you a minute to talk to a neighbor about it if you want to.